Thank you, Greta. Dobro utro, and this is it for my Bulgarian. It's a pleasure to be in Bulgaria. And in preparing this visit, I realized that this is my second visit to Bulgaria. I said to the minister, my first visit to Bulgaria took place in 1996 in the context of negotiation of a privilege and immunities agreement between the OECD and Bulgaria. At the time, we thought that Bulgaria may join the OECD in a few years. So, as you can see, time is an elastic notion. And I would like to also inspired by what I heard from both the minister, the deputy prime minister, and the two ambassadors. I would like to share some views of, Greta was nice enough to call me experienced, I would say an old timer on those issues of corruption. And I would like to start with exactly what you said, Greta, and also you, Minister. When the convention was negotiated, there was no mention whatsoever, or there was no idea whatsoever, or there was no, and I was trying to recollect my memory, yes, I'm getting old, but I still remember a few things, of anything similar to collective action. And I think the reason was because at the time we had a fairly simplistic view of the issues. So there was an issue, and the issue was companies can bribe abroad and cannot be prosecuted. We're going to fix the issue by having the convention, and which was the first postulate. And the second postulate is that there is an issue and there is only one problem, and the problem are the companies. Both postulates proved to be, I don't say wrong, but very simplistic, very simplistic. So, drawing on one word raised by the speaker from the Deputy Prime Minister, I said, okay, actually what is interesting is that what we learned today is that the word in order to fight corruption is not one, but is multi. You need to have a multi-year approach. You need to have multilateralism. You need to have a multidisciplinary approach. And you need to have a multi-stakeholder approach. And the second mantra is, again, Minister, you said Bulgaria is not a normal country. I don't know what is a normal country. I come from Italy. I'm not sure it's a normal country either. And also the normal countries that thought that they were normal countries in the fight against corruption, or they thought that they had no corruption issues, like France or Germany or others, discovered that the issues may be a bit more complicated than that. So, I mean, Bulgaria has its own efforts to make, but, you know, you are not alone. But the second mantra is, apart from the word multi, is we need to go beyond the law. The law is essential. The law is the pillar. The law is the foundation. Because if you don't have a legal system in place, there is nothing you can do. But it's not enough. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition. And that's where collective action plays an incredible useful role. And it's not by accident that this notion of collective action appeared around 10 years after the convention was signed, and when implementation was starting to be the crunch, the real issue. The World Bank published a guide in 2008, Fighting Corruption Through Collective Action. But more importantly, now it is recognized in the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention that Bulgaria has endorsed as an adherent to the Anti-Bribery Convention. So what I'm going to try to say in a few words now is to describe what do we mean, or what do we, I think Greta made a comment about, this is a concept, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. What we mean by collective action what role is the Basel Institute of Governance playing in that respect, and how this could be applied in a country like Bulgaria. So the starting point is that collective action is the recognition that, as I said, there is not one factor explaining corruption, and there is no one solution. Corruption is explained by multi-factor issues, and you cannot approach it through only one lens and one government. Collective action is also a way to build trust, and through that, build trust. You need to have sufficient level of trust between the various partners, and through the collective action, you also build trust. Because at the end of the day, in the fight against corruption, it's a fight between two levels of trust. There is a lot of trust in a corruption pact. A corruption pact is based on trust. Like it or not, it's based on trust. People trust each other. The challenge is that we need to have the same level of trust between those who fight against corruption. So it's really a fight between two levels of trust. For that, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. There are various forms of collective action. I'm going to illustrate some of them. But basically, the idea is to have as many stakeholders as possible at the table, but also to not necessarily have a preconceived view on you need to have all the stakeholders at the table. So clearly, who are we talking about? Civil society, private sector, government, academics, possibly even citizens, ordinary citizens. Do we mean that all the collective action should have all those stakeholders involved? No, not necessarily. I'm going to illustrate by a few collective actions which are mainly driven by private sectors. They are perfectly legitimate. In other cases, like through the integrity pacts developed by TI, civil society, government, and private sector is working together. There are other forms of collective action which are typically grassroots, which are almost carried out by ordinary citizens. So what is important is to work collectively. The second point that I would like to note also is that there are different types and goals that can be achieved through collective action, and there are different working methods. The Basel Institute of Governance, which now has a role as in a sense, the trustee of collective action on behalf of the B20, because it is the hub of the B20 collective action initiative, has developed a draft typology and has tried, again, not to be prescriptive, but to be descriptive of what types of collective action one could envisage. And there are mainly three types. Let me briefly explain what we mean. The first one is collective action designed to develop standards, standard setting initiatives. There is one perfect example, which is the Maritime Anti-Corruption Network. What was the issue? The issue was very simple. A number of companies were facing solicitations in a number of countries when it comes to download goods in ports, harbor. Mainly small petty bribes, but very irritating and very time-consuming and very negative, because if your good is stocked if you have a perishable good and you need to pay the $50 in order to have your good unloaded, you will pay the $50 because you don't want all your cargoes to be destroyed. This initiative has the support of now more than 200 international maritime value chain companies, cargoes, but not only cargoes providers. And they have been extremely effective in several countries by developing new legislation together with the government, in association with the government, in order to limit this question of facilitation or solicitation. The second example is a purely national initiative in Thailand. The collective action against corruption, which includes 1,400 member companies today. It is mainly addressed at helping both large listed companies and SMEs to minimize corruption risk, and it collaborates again with the authorities at the level of a nation. Whereas the MACN, the Maritime, is a transversal international initiative. This collective action is therefore more focused on enforcement and also providing certification. And the third type of collective action is an engagement-focused initiative. And here you have an interesting coalition which was set up a few years ago in order to fight facilitation payment across the sectors. What is a facilitation payment? Is a bribe that is not called a bribe. It's the $10 I was mentioning to you, the tip that you give to the police in order not to get the ticket, the tip that you give to the person who has to put a stamp in order for you to build a window in your house. This initiative is both a network for sharing and building best practices in the fight against facilitation payments. And it's also a data-driven initiative to confront the problem. So as you can see, with those three examples, and they are only examples, there are many others, you have a purely private sector initiative focused on one particular issue in one particular industry. You have a nationwide initiative focused on basically raising awareness of the private sector on the risk faced by corruption in Thailand. And then you have an initiative focusing on a specific issue, but cross-sectoral. And I think this shows the variety of collective action initiative that can be built. So, bottom line is you need to find your own way. You need to find the Bulgarian way, if I can say. The Basel Institute of Governance is very pleased to know the interest of the government and its commitment to anti-corruption. I know that the Basel Institute of Governance is involved and is working a lot with the current government on developing the legal framework. You are making an incredible amount of progress, and this will help also, by the way, in the context of your accession to the OECD. But then, in a sense, I'm sorry to say, Minister, I will be very blunt, this is the easy part. The difficult part is indeed, as Greta said, to translate this legal framework in concrete action. The Basel Institute remains available to assist the government and beyond the government, all the relevant stakeholders here in the room and in Bulgaria to elaborate innovative responses to the fight against corruption by Bulgaria, including and in particular through the collective action. And I would like to leave you with a quotation that I love, which I use very often, maybe too often, so fortunately nobody has heard one of my speeches before. Albert Einstein once said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking used when we created them." So we need to think outside of the boxes and approach things in a different way. Thank you for your attention. Do widzenia.